Just over a year ago, Squad had its most controversial update, the Infantry Combat Overhaul, or ICO. This update completely changed how weapons felt. It introduced a weapon stability mechanic, there were now picture-in-picture optics, suppression was everywhere, and the game moved to prevent less lone wolf players and encourage fire superiority and teamwork. Since then, we've had some small balance passes for weapons, but nothing has come close to what we're seeing now in Squad 8.2. Now, I don't want to say that Squad has reverted the ICO. No amount of Reddit, Discord, YouTube comments can convince me that this is a complete reversion, because it is very much still in place. However, in Squad V8.2, there is a huge update to the weapon handling stability, recoil, reload time, and ADS speed to fine-tune every single weapon in the ICO system. In this video, we're going to go over everything, and I have included side-by-side comparisons between 8.1 and 8.2 so you can see it for yourself. I'm going to offer my opinions, but you're going to see it right in front of you. So when necessary, I've also enlarged the stability indicators so you can more easily identify just how stability changes may affect your favorite weapon. This is a massive patch, and although there is no new content per se, if you haven't played Squad for a while due to the ICO, you should definitely jump back in. After playing a bunch of real games of Squad 8.2 and also spending hours in the training range testing everything, I can confidently say that the changes have been made in a way that if you do like the ICO, the game will still punish players with poor stamina management and who are lone wolfing. If you have fire superiority, if you're working in a squad, if you're working with infantry and vehicles, you will still have massive advantages. But if you didn't like the ICO, the game now is far less frustrating when handling certain weapons, and that makes for much more enjoyable gameplay. A lot of these changes are small, but they add up, and the devs themselves stated that the intention behind this was to make the weapons feel more responsive, reduce weapon destabilization as a punishment, improve the effectiveness of machine guns when not bipoded, and make it so that submachine guns have improved control for better close quarters combat. So with that, let's get started and take a look at one of the biggest changes that they've implemented, and that's with the battle rifles. The most noticeable change you'll see is that weapon stabilization has increased dramatically, and to showcase this, I did sprint to prone and sprint to standing testing. In 8.2, you can take a stabilized shot far sooner than in 8.1, meaning that your character no longer has those patented noodle arms and wobbly guns. Additionally, the recoil has been reduced as well, and the devs state that they removed what was called a heavy recoil curve and instead have now implemented a standard recoil curve for all of these weapons. Full auto will still have a significant kick, but it's way more manageable, and semi-auto will now allow you to take accurate shots much quicker. Movement, equip, and reload speeds have also been standardized, and although I didn't notice it, there's also supposedly a new camera shake feature implemented in order to make these weapons feel as powerful as they should. Weapons like the G3, the FAL, the MP76 are way more controllable now. In order to help offset this stability buff, the one-shot kill potential for the G3 has been reduced. It can still happen, but more often than not, you'll get hard-hitting shots which will require immediate bandaging or the player will just bleed out. As you can see in these comparisons, stability time has been almost cut in half for many of these weapons, and quicker firing shots are no longer what I call hope shots, meaning that you were just hoping that they would hit somewhere near the target due to how hard it was to handle the weapon when firing. Recoil across the board is also less jerky, making it easier to predict and less like you're fighting yourself every time you try to shoot. And I will admit this has transitioned amazingly to real games. It has made some of my least favorite weapons way more fun to play, and something like the G3 and the ZF1 optic can now be really deadly if you get a good angle. If you're still shift Wing and just sprinting everywhere, you're not going to be able to hit your shots, but if you are maintaining around half a bar of stamina, it's noticeably better. Your standard rifles have also had a huge stabilization pass. First, the AKMs have had a complete rework on their recoil, and paired with that 2 to 3 times faster stabilization time, are back to being a good, hard-hitting pick for players. Full auto with the AK is still a bit tough to control, but swapping from semi to full auto and burst firing it is now completely viable. However, AKMs are the only ones who have had recoil changes. For the other rifles, the stability times have made fire and move much more realistic. As you can see, no matter the weapon, no matter the optic, a player that is moving around normally, sprinting a bit, running a bit, and maintaining that golden half stamina bar can quickly stop and engage the enemy with accurate shots. ADS times have also been standardized. Movement, equip, and reload speeds are now around 60 to 70% of your regular movement speed depending on the optic, and the entire weapon class is way more forgiving, especially with those longer range optics. Now, it still isn't the quick ADS tap firing of pre-ICO squad, that was absolutely ridiculous, but it will allow players with a bit more skill to take advantage of it if they have the stability. These rifles are now the fastest weapon type to stabilize other than submachine guns and pistols, so really move around the map deliberately and you can now take advantage of all of these changes. And as a way to differentiate these weapons a bit more, the devs have also reworked the M4 Simon offense to give it a bit better CQB properties. It appears to have a bit better ADS speed and stability, so if you are interested in using a stubby M4, now's your chance. Additionally, there are also small benefits to using foregrips, and they should now reduce your recoil slightly. I want to say that these changes are obvious, but it seems like a very minor change. I feel like the SUSAT has a bit less scope bounce, but the Ironsight MPT-76 seems negligible. I don't know if this is because the devs themselves have made the foregrips have different properties, since the L85 has the full foregrip bipod, whereas the MPT-76 just has a small angled foregrip. But either way, do let me know if you guys do notice something or if they're playing better for you or not down in the comments below. For Marksman rifles, these changes are similar to the battle rifles, and there's now screen shake to make the weapon feel more powerful. Now, this might be counterintuitive, but I didn't include any bipoded shots with these rifles in order to showcase just how much the stability has changed. Bipods will always give you maximum stability and control, so use crouch or prone bipoded stances when possible. But if you notice, when standing and firing semi-auto, these DMRs are much more responsive. While they don't have as quick a stabilization as your standard rifle, they handle way better than they did in the past. Once again, if you're out of stamina, if you're out of stability, if you're constantly moving, you're not going to be able to hit much. But proper stability management and stopping to take a well-aimed shot is going to be much less frustrating. Stabilization tweaks and movement standardization aside, there weren't any individual changes to these rifles apart from the M110. This did also get a nice recoil pass, so you do get far less optic shake when firing, in addition to the quick stability. Bolt-action rifles have had these same changes, and once again, this can be showcased by the sprint to stand test. Realistically, you will really never use these rifles this way. It's ridiculous, it's not how it's meant to be played, but the stability change affects every stance and every time you move the rifle, so it's the most obvious way to show them off. Although the weapon is not quick to stabilize, it is far quicker than it was in the past. Now, once again, the devs have stated that they've included a screen shake, but I'm not really seeing much more than what was in the past. But from just using them in the non-bipoded stance, I can confidently say that these noodle arms are gone. They're still a bit unwieldy, and apart from the Mosin, you really need to use a bipod, but I no longer feel like I'm completely useless if I do need to try and stop and shoot in a pinch. The big thing is though, once you are stabilized, try to not make large sweeping movements or run around, because that will just remove that stabilization. If you use these bolt action rifles quite a bit, the recoil has not changed, so there's nothing more to learn, you just get to use them a bit quicker. Now, moving on to the auto rifles, once again, if you sprint and stop the bipod, you will get max stabilization. So the following comparisons are going to have sprint to standing semi-auto shots so you can properly see these changes. Stabilization is of course faster than it was before, but it will be slightly slower than the standard rifle. This will reduce the time standing out in the open if you do need to take a quick shot, or even allows you to be much more accurate if you can't immediately bipod. I frequently use auto rifles like a regular rifle, and I only bipod when I have an opportune moment in maybe a window, doorway, sandbags, anywhere that I can actually properly use a bipod. Other than that, it's a rifle with a lot of ammo for me. These changes have made these weapons far more usable, and you can of course go full auto and hit your target, but being able to pick up and fire while on the move is much easier now. Now, there haven't been any recoil changes for these rifles apart from the RPK. The RPK's recoil has been reduced to prevent those bouncy and jerky shots when in semi and full auto, and it makes for a much smoother experience when firing this weapon. It is still a bit jank when compared to the other ones, but it's much easier to keep your eyes on the target when you're firing it. Now, if there's one weapon that's had the best singular change to it, it's the M249 SAW. The MOA has been reduced from 12 minutes to 6 minutes, and if you're not sure what that means, a very simple way to explain MOA, or minutes of angle, is that at 100 yards previously in 8.1, the bullet you fired could be off as much as 12 inches away from the target. But this compounds, meaning that a 200-yard shot could be off by 24 inches, a 300-yard shot could be off by 36 inches, and so on, making it much harder to hit enemies, but far easier to suppress a large area. The devs have now cut this in half, so instead of a 12-inch deviation at 100 yards, it's 6 inches. And although it's not a laser, you shouldn't be a full-on stormtrooper anymore when you're firing this thing. Overall, it just feels like I can hit things with the saw now, and that is a huge win in my book. Both the M249 family of weapons and the RPD has also had improved stabilization, ADS, equip, and reload speeds, and the hipfire is much more controllable. For medium machine guns, the M240 Bravo has had its recoil and sway reduced, making for prone and bipoded firing much easier. As a whole, all of these machine guns now have better hipfire handling, although I still wouldn't really recommend doing that if possible. Additionally, the time that it takes from the weapon to go to the lowered idle position when you aren't firing it has been increased to 30 seconds, so you can quickly start firing if needed. Overall, I found myself being able to see through the optics much easier while firing these machine guns, and I don't know if this is some unintended effect, but of course that made me more likely to fire in full auto instead of just burst firing. Laying down on the trigger is far less jumpy and visually distracting than it was in 8.1, but because of that, there's a weird result that a lot of these weapons seem to tilt to the right on full auto. Now, I don't know if this is intended, I don't know if this is a new change, I don't know if I just never noticed it because I really couldn't do full auto firing in ICO, but the tilt to the right is legit. The MG3 is probably one of the worst. The PKP and the Russian type weapons are a close second. I got used to it after a bit, but it still just looks weird. But I guess I'll take that over the bouncy mess we had in the past. If there's any of you guys out here that have fired these weapons professionally, does this happen? This looks a little ridiculous to me, so let me know. Finally, to wrap it up, we have the submachine guns, and I'm happy to say that you can finally control these. Sprinting and being able to fire full auto for all of these weapons now is incredibly easy, as it should be, and you can just mag dump your targets and keep on moving. To top it off, the ADS speed is now a blazing 0.2 seconds. That is the quickest in the game, second to the pistol, but if you don't want to do that, you can still squeeze off full auto hip firing if needed, and the whole thing just feels fun to use. SMGs are supposed to be CQB monsters, and they were a bit of a joke previously with the MP5 feeling okay, but it did have some weird accuracy issues. Well, now, at close range, the MP5 is an absolute laser with the SOAR 109T a close second, but I do think the Scorpion has had the biggest improvement, even though it still is a bit bouncy. Either way, I really wouldn't use any of these weapons in semi-auto now, and instead just try to position yourself to take advantage of the quick ADS speed and full auto accuracy just to dump someone in close quarters. And real quick, although that was the last weapon class, the devs did also make some pistol adjustments too. Running around with your pistol is now back in style, and the sway change is noticeably better. ADS movement speed, equipment movement speed, and reload movement speed is now just as fast as your regular movement speed, so you will never be slowed down handling a pistol. When in doubt, pull out the pistol as needed. It's much better now. So that's all the weapon changes, and my final thoughts, I'm sure a lot of people may think I hate this or that this is a complete rejection of the ICO, and I've got to disagree. The ICO clearly works, but if you watched any of my content over the past year or so since the ICO did drop, you'd know that my biggest complaints were how weapons like the machine guns and the autorifles were way too bouncy and had unrealistic recoil when moving or bipoded. I also hated that the weapons like the G3 or FAL were way too punishing and looked a little comical. But in general, I did like the overall feel the ICO gave, and I do think the game has improved immensely since they removed the snap firing mechanics that we had in the past. Now in 8.2, I think some of these weapons may be a bit overtuned. Maybe some of these rifles with the larger optics may be a bit too quick to ADS and take accurate shots. But overall, it does just feel like the ICO. It feels like I can shoot a bit better, and to me, that's a win-win. You get the ICO, I am no longer skill issuing the G3, and we can all enjoy squad. But what do you guys think? Are you excited to fire full auto machine guns again? Maybe you can finally go back to running that FAL on a regular militia, or are you just going to load up and play squad like nothing ever happened? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. But that's it for me. Until next time, peace.